So I actually spent a lot of time analyzing the difference between a near-death experience, an out-of-body experience, and an astral travel. And they are three distinct things. The hardest thing for people that try to leave their body is it's all fine and dandy until you see your body. Like you can have an out-of-body experience, you get out of your body, and you're like, oh my God, I'm out, I'm free. And you turn around, you see your body, and boom, you're right back in. Almost every time. So your consciousness is only streaming a part of it into your body. With the other part of your consciousness, which is still in the spirit realm, you can change your focus and you put it on Mars or something, right? Or you just want to go travel the cosmos. That's astral traveling. It's not the same thing. You didn't just like peel it out of your body and walk around your house in this physical world. So say you're in a lucid dream, it's like you're in layers of dreams and you think you're awake. You're like, go and get in the shower or something, get ready for your day. And then like your hand goes to the wall or something like that. And you're just like, oh my God, I'm still in a dream. This is the key to remote viewing. And this is why it's so hard for people to become masters in it. They call it the AOL, it's the analytical overlay. So he was able to kind of map out the astral realms. He traveled out of body and astrally for decades. And one of the places they found was called the park, this in between. It's like where you went after physical death, and it had all these pathways that led to other places after that.
Ultra minds, ultra minds, ultra minds, ultra JK, ultra. Ultra minds, ultra minds, ultra minds, ultra JK, ultra.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Ultra Minds. I'm super excited to talk to my guest today, who just started an awesome podcast with Spectre Vision called Conscious Observers. He studies manifestation, lucid dreaming, altered states, and remote viewing. So, Jordan Crowder, welcome.
Hi, Jen. Thanks for having me.
I know. I'm so glad we finally get to chat.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been following you for years, so this is a super cool moment for me.
Oh, thank you so much. I got to meet you in Vegas that time, and I wish I could have gone to Psy Games.
Yeah, Psy Games was a blast. And yeah, we met you briefly in Vegas. That was kind of at the beginning of our journey. You were kind of already heading up, and we like Sarah watched one of your YouTubes one time or something, and you were talking about how you got onto TikTok. And Sarah's my wife, and she was talking about how you kind of did this almost like a 30-day challenge type thing or something like that, and you were just putting out daily videos and to see what would happen, and you blew up. And I was always kind of rattling off my ideas to her, and she was like, why don't you try this? And I was like, well, I'm a 40-something-year-old man. I'm not going to get on TikTok. That's crazy talk. And she was like, just do it. It's changing. This is during the pandemic, and everybody was just doing their thing online. And anyways, I started doing a video a day, and it just exploded. And I thought that was really cool. It was a whole new platform, a whole new way of just kind of spilling my mind out into the world. And it really changed a lot of things in my life doing that, having that platform to express myself and not really care what anyone thinks and just go through all these wild topics. And I met so many amazing people along the way, including you.
Oh my God, that's so sweet. I didn't realize that you had started that way. I thought that you were already booming doing this, and then you're just killing it now. You're just doing such cool stuff. Your new podcast and all of the stuff you do with Monroe and your courses. You're just doing so much awesome stuff. And I love Sarah too. I'm always like chatting with her in DMs.
Yeah, she's amazing. So yeah, I mean, it's like you have a big influence. I mean, that's why they call you an influencer. And like my little story, I'm sure there's millions of other people out there that have similar stories. So you never know, like when you're out there talking and doing your thing, you never know what kind of little impact you're going to have on people's lives that maybe isn't so little. So it's pretty neat. You'll never know 99% of them because, how would you? But just know that, you are making an impact on people's lives. That's super cool.
Oh, you're so sweet. Oh my gosh.
And you mentioned Monroe, and the only reason I went there is because they were putting together their first ever Creator Gateway, and you were on their second Creator Gateway. And I want to hear about your experience. But like that was at the beginning, it was during COVID, and I was doing the patterning, and I was trying to manifest going there, and I was changing my life using all the Monroe techniques. But I was like, they were closed, and it was kind of a commitment. It's like 6 days, and it's pretty expensive. And I was like, even when they open, I don't know if I'll be able to go. And I was using all their techniques, and then pandemic's over, and I get an email from them, and it's the most improbable thing. They're like, hey, we're doing our first ever Creator Gateway. Everyone here at Monroe is watching your TikToks. And I'm like, what? And they're like, we love them. We want you to come. And I was like, this is crazy. And then I went and spent like the most magical week there ever, but all because of TikTok. I mean,
Wow. I know.
Such
It
a
really
wild.
is like TikTok gets a bad name for many reasons, but there's so many people like us and a lot of other creators that have came from TikTok that it's just like the way it like propelled people into their purpose in many different things outside of spirituality and consciousness too. So many people get propelled into their purpose, musicians, artists, performers. It's really like it really is like a vessel and everything is like a mirror, it's what you make of it and what you put into it is what you get back. So I think a lot of people that, maybe have some negative associations with TikTok, they're probably just using it in a way that is not beneficial to them.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, it is what you make of it, and, like, what I've realized, I was out there, I do a daily walk and talk in the woods, and I explore kind of the wildest topics you could ever imagine. Because my brain is just a little wired differently, and I realized, I was like, "Okay," at the beginning, I thought, "No one is gonna jive with this," like, "No one's thinking about these things. This is just thoughts in my head." And I would put it out there to the world, and, after my first week, I had 2 videos, hit over 1,000,000 views, and I'm talking about very far out stuff. And I was like, "Whoa, this is crazy," because not just the views that's superficial, but, like, I was reading the comments and I was getting messages from people, and what people kept saying is, "Man, the stuff you're saying is the stuff that's in my head. I'm just afraid to say it, or I'm insecure, or I don't have anyone to talk to about the stuff." So what I realized is that we all are, very similar. We're all humans. We're all having this human experience. We're all kind of confused. We're all kind of perplexed. We're all looking at this saying, "Who are we? Where are we? Like, why are we here? Like, what is this place?" And people are at different levels of their awakening and their journey, but I realized that the questions I was asking, is kind of far out as they
Mm.
seemed, are pretty fundamental in that most people have similar questions. And then when somebody says it, it gives them kind of authority to then themselves
Mhm.
talk about it. They're like, "Okay, maybe I'm not crazy. That guy just said it." And then they talk about it. And then they tell their friends, and their friends say, "Hey, I had that same thought." And then that's how, like, this whole awakening happens, is people getting out of the shadows, and you know being okay with discussing these things that might seem a little crazy.
Right. And I think that like awakening, obviously a lot of these older spiritual teachings kind of had to portray it as this kind of otherworldly type of thing where it's like, oh, another dimension. But really what it is it's integrating like this. It's somebody getting to go to work and talk about it with their coworker, or somebody talking about it with their family member, or someone being able to have like a little conversation around like synchronicities or manifestation just when they're in Walmart or something. So it's like that is the real awakening is when it just integrates normally into the world and then just slowly becomes part of daily life.
Yeah, 100%. And then people kind of take it a step further after they get over that initial, like, kind of fear of talking about it and that kind of stuff. And then they're like, "Okay, then what can I do with this? Like, what does this
Mhm.
mean?" And then that's when it leads you to things like the Monroe Institute and other things that people do, other modalities of exploring these other concepts and ideas that thousands of years ago, like you talked about, like the ancient mystics, and where we get our esoteric, knowledge and wisdom from, they didn't have all the gadgets and distractions we have. So they spent a lot more time exploring these topics, and talking about it and playing with it. For entertainment, they would stare into fires and sit outside and look at the stars. And I mean, they're in this constant state of wonder, like, what is the universe? What is this? And they were constantly thinking about it, and applying the things they learned to their life. They were way more enlightened cats back then. I think that, they didn't have all the distractions we have. And now we're kind of trying to go back to that. Like, okay, maybe those guys were onto something.
Right.
Maybe all these kind of ancient esoteric, teachings, they were tapped into something more fundamental than we are now. And now we're kind of circling back around to that, it seems. And when people get past that first step of their awakening, it gets into the, okay, now what do we do with this? Like, how can we take this to the next level?
And I think the other thing too that kind of changes our situation now is the level of comfort. It's kind of like the Maslow hierarchy of needs. Our needs are really met versus those people in those times. So then we have this huge advantage because, before, thousands of years ago, people were living much more in survival. Life wasn't as comfortable, getting food, even preparing food and things like that. Everything was so much more difficult or more steps. So we have a lot of time in a different way to fill that space with. They had less things to do, but the things that
Mhm.
they did were harder, more steps, more work. For us, it's like, okay, we could press a button, the food will be here. We could press a button, this next thing will be here. So we kind of have this other type of freedom to explore those higher levels of consciousness because our basic needs are mostly met. Even a person whose needs are struggling now are still better than a person's needs, thousands of years ago.
Mhm. 100%. I talk about that exact thing all the time in that I look at myself I've always looked at myself through like a philosophical lens. Like I try to analyze the world in more of a philosophical way. Like what does this mean to us as humans and as souls? And I've always envied ancient philosophers because here's a profession, for lack of a better word, that like literally was paid and revered to think and to ask big questions. I'm like, that's what I want to do. And so that's what I've always like wanted to do. And I always think about it in this way, like, man, like take like a great like Seneca or Marcus Aurelius, some great, philosopher, and put them in this time where, like you said, they don't have to go out and forage for food. They don't have to worry about survival as much and things like that. They are free to think and to ponder. And they would be like a kid in a candy store in today's world. They'd be like, okay, so you're telling me I can just think, I can just think, and I have resources. I have a supercomputer in my pocket, and I can just get answers. And this is amazing. I can connect with other philosophers around the world instantaneously. They would be freaking out. And I feel like that's how I've been my whole life. Like I wanted to be an entrepreneur and I wanted to create like financial abundance only so that I wrote a book called Entrepreneurial Spirits. And the whole point of the book is create a business and create revenue streams so that you can buy the most important thing in the world, which is time. And with that time, use the time to explore your spiritual gifts and to think more. And that was the entire premise of the book. And that's what I've tried to do my whole life is like try to, we have to have money to survive, obviously, unfortunately. So that's the thing. But try to create like a pathways of revenue. And then with that money, don't go out and buy fancy watches and cars and stuff like that. Buy time and be like the ancient philosophers and think and sit and relax and explore and enjoy the universe, enjoy our world and our life. But that's what I've always tried to do. And you nailed it on the head when you said we live in this time now where people can spend more time in thought and in reflection. And they might not have had that luxury in many epochs of civilization. I mean, that just was not a luxury people had. So I would encourage people to take advantage of that, even if it seems like your life is crazy and hectic, which most are. I'm not denying that at all. But there's still time in there. There's plenty of time that we do have that you can dedicate to this.
And with you saying that, it really gives me the perspective that like we are living like the philosophers, like we literally are doing that. We're getting to go online, talk about our thoughts, sort through things, kind of explain things in our own way, build upon the thoughts that were already out there. So like, yeah, that's such a beautiful perspective because it's really like we are doing that. It's just
Hmm.
in this different setting, in a modern setting. But, now people really that was for a very select few, and now it's, like, available to almost everybody.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, and I mean, it's one of the reasons I think that the Greeks and the Greek civilization in particular, like, exploded with spirituality and consciousness. Like, that was a huge consciousness explosion at the time, and for the first time, they used to do, like, these speeches. They would build these big, kind of outdoor, theaters and I can't think of the word for it, but anyways, like places where people would go and talk, and they would get these philosophers and the great minds, and they'd go and they would just talk, kind of like a TED talk back in the day. And then people would come and gather, and they would say, "Oh my God, I've never thought about what the purpose of life is," or all these deep questions, because like you said, they're too busy trying to survive. And then for the first time, people would go and they would gather around like these intellectuals, and they would ask these profound questions, and then that would ripple and is this butterfly this domino effect, and all these people would go home and talk about that to their friends and that kind of stuff. There was this huge explosion of consciousness, and a lot of it had to do with people like the U's of the world would actually have a platform. They weren't just talking to the generals and to the leaders. They were talking to the people, the everyday man. And that like had this huge cascading effect. And that's what we're doing now, but on steroids, like with these kinds of platforms.
Right. So, I wanted to ask a little bit about your Monroe experience, some of the things that stick out for you, but also the integration, because, that's kind of where me and my group is at, who just did the creator program. So we're all like a couple of weeks out, and I feel more grounded now. I felt super ungrounded for like over a week, more than I felt after ayahuasca. So,
Yeah.
I want to hear a little bit about kind of what your like big takeaways were from Gateway, and also how was your integration and how did that like slowly catch up in your real life?
Yeah. It's funny you say that because like you are like in a dream state for like a week and you aren't grounded. I mean, it doesn't matter. You can go outside and put your feet on the earth and I mean, you're still floating. And you're in this theta brainwave state for like 5 or 6 days straight. I mean, we do multiple deep meditations every day and you're not just meditating. It's not just like, oh, let's relax and get in touch with our thoughts. You're traveling, you're going places, you're leaving your body. I mean, it's a very surreal experience and you're doing it multiple times a day every single day and your brain is just completely clicked out of this reality and in between all these other realities, so to the point where like I tell a story about how when we were talking about lucid dreaming in one of the days, they tell you one of the ways you can tell if you're in a false awakening, which, so say you're in a lucid dream, it's like you're in layers of dreams and you can sometimes wake up from one layer of a dream and you think you're awake. You're like, go and get in the shower or something, get ready for your day. And then like your hand goes to the wall or something like that. And you're just like, oh my God, I'm still in a dream. This is nuts. One of the things they teach you is you put your hand like this and you push your finger. And if your finger goes through your hand, obviously you're in a dream. It's like a subtle way to tell. And there was 2 times I can remember, but I think there was a third. But anyways, while I'm at the Monroe Institute and I'm talking to people, like I'll just be talking to them, having a conversation like this, and the person will like kind of slyly be like this, and I'm just like, holy crap, you don't know if we're dreaming or not. Like that's how like
Oh
intense it
my
was.
God.
And I saw people doing that. Like it wasn't like they were practicing. It was like they're off in the distance and I would see them. They're like, okay, this is real.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's how trippy it gets. And so when you leave, like the way I kind of made sense of it is like it raises your perceptional awareness, right? To like here. And so maybe before you were here, and there's going to be a drop down. There's going to be a little bit of a come down, like a hangover effect when you leave, but it's still going to be when it come down, it's going to rest higher than it was before, meaning that you're going to stay in this expanded state of awareness forever for the rest of your life. Like they'll never take any of these things from you. It might fade, but it's still there. Um, so, but there is a little bit of a come down afterwards. Like you go back to real life and you're just like, oh, real life's weird. And like you have to integrate and it's hard to like talk to people that have never been there about it, 'cause they don't understand. And this last week I was at the Psy Games and I was with Emily Bledsoe, who was there with you. And she's amazing. And she went from the Monroe Institute almost immediately to the Psy Games. And the Psy Games was a very surreal kind of an event too. And she was like, I need to go, like, I need to ground. I need to show like, at some point you have to just come back down to earth and have time to integrate it. So I kind of went off on a tangent there, but it goes into like we are these eternal spiritual beings having a temporary human experience. And like we're so used to going through life like in human kind of mode, right? We go to work, we pick up the laundry and do all the normal human things. And then when you get out of that mode and you go into this other mode and you're like, okay, we're traversing dimensions and talking to higher intelligences and having paranormal experiences and all that. And you get into that mode and you're like, okay, this is reality too. Like this is fun. This is cool. Let's explore. And then you go back to the real human world and you're just like, it's tough to like kind of, integrate that and be like, okay, I'm a human. I have to go do human things. I got to pay my bills and yada, yada. But I really just want to go play in these other realms. And you know what I mean? So it's, I don't know. It's a tough one, but when you can integrate that and you can kind of exist in both, one foot in each and be grounded still, but realize that, okay, we are, a spiritual being that's kind of streamed into a physical body. And once you come to grips with that, you can dip out and have some fun and then dip back in, there is this like duality that you can kind of maintain the equilibrium of. And once you do that, things get really, really fun.
Mhm. And so I wanted to ask you too, because there's kind of some debate about around this. I don't know if it's there is one specific answer. And I also asked it at Monroe, and they had given a little bit more of like a fluid answer to it. So there is a big debate between, the OBE, the out of body experience, and astral projection. So some people are saying that this is like overlapping and that astral projection kind of is OBE. And then you have this really traditional type of OBE where you float out of the body and like look back at yourself. So like what are your thoughts on those type of topics where you astral projection, you are really like leaving the body, but what do you think about like could you call that an out of body, or do you think that they're two different things?
They're definitely two different things. It's funny, my very first podcast episode was on the difference between, because I had a near-death experience, and that's what started my whole spiritual journey. And I won't get into that right now, but like I come to find out later after analyzing it, I didn't actually have a textbook near-death experience. I actually had an out-of-body experience that was kind of triggered by, my body almost dying. So anyways, and then I learned how to astral project and astral travel. So I actually spent a lot of time analyzing the difference between a near-death experience, an out-of-body experience, and an astral travel. And they are three distinct things. I mean, there's overlap, obviously, because it's all consciousness-based and it's where your consciousness is focused, but they are distinctly different. And how I would, kind of quickly summarize it is so my general framework and view of how this works is we're a spirit, we're a consciousness that streams in to this physical body, and that this world we exist in is like a simulator for consciousness development. Not a simulation, mind you, but a simulator. Like how a pilot uses a flight simulator to become a better pilot, our consciousness uses this body in this world to level up its quality of consciousness through these experiences. So our consciousness streams into this body and uses it like an avatar to have this physical experience. And that's all fine and dandy. So when it's tuned into here, it's like a radio receiver. It's like tuned to a very particular frequency. So your consciousness wants to be in this body. It kind of needs this body to exist in this physical world. It kind of like if we wanted to go to the depths of the sea, we'd have to get in a submarine to go down there. We couldn't swim down there. So your consciousness needs this body. It wants to be in this body while it's here in this physical density. So when you have an out-of-body experience, what you're doing is you are phase shifting. You're turning the dial just a little bit, and you're actually peeling your consciousness sort of out of your body like Velcro. And it fights it. It struggles because your consciousness doesn't really want to leave the body in that way. Same reason you wouldn't want to jump out of a submarine when you're, 2,000 feet down in the sea. It's too dense. It's not made for that. So it actually wants to stay in the body. So when you have an out-of-body experience and you peel out, you are here, your consciousness is here, but in this physical world. So kind of like a fish out of water. And everything seems more clunky and jerky. Everything's kind of black and white and muted colors and stuff. You can travel around consciously, like Robert Monroe figured out how to really effortlessly, like kind of travel around in that state. But your consciousness is kind of here in the physical. And it now is like kind of subjected to the physical laws of nature and like laws of physics and stuff like that. And it's not really made for that. So there's a little bit of static, a little bit of interference, and it's not always a very smooth thing. And then as soon as you see your body or think about your body, you typically just snap right back in because you're tuning your frequency back to your body. Boop, there we are, and you're right back in. It's a big issue. Like the hardest thing for people that try to leave their body is it's all fine and dandy until you see your body. Like you can have an out of body experience, you get out of your body, and you're like, oh my God, I'm out, I'm free. And you turn around, you see your body, and boom, you're right back in almost every time. And once you get over that, then you can go and roam more freely and have more fun. But an astral travel is completely different because what you're doing at that point is you're moving your kind of conscious awareness. So you're not taking your entire consciousness out. You're realizing that your consciousness is already mostly out of your body. It's just streaming like a part in. So kind of like a radio signal. That radio signal hits your stereo and you can play that radio station, right? But there's more signal going to other radios. It's not 100% of that signal is going to the radio. So your consciousness is only streaming a part of it into your body. With the other part of your consciousness, which is still in the spirit realm, you can change your focus. So right now our focused awareness is in this body, right? So this is what I see out of my body. But you can quiet your senses by, meditating. And when you turn off all your senses, you're no longer feeling things and touching things and smelling things and tasting things. And when it happens, you get more in tune with your signal because you don't have all these sensory inputs hitting you. And then you can change your focus. So instead of your focus being in your body, now you can put your focus somewhere else. It's how we remote view. It's how we do all sorts of things. So if you change your focused awareness, like where you're focusing your consciousness out of your body, and you put it on Mars or something, right? Or you just want to go travel the cosmos, that's astral traveling. But you didn't like, it's not the same thing. You didn't just like peel it out of your body and walk around your house in this physical world. You're somewhere else. And it's usually more vivid. You know, I call it super color. You see colors that you've never seen before. Everything's bright, everything's like hyper realistic. And that's because you are in your native world. Like that's the non-physical. That's where your consciousness resides. That's where it's from. And that's where it feels more natural. And that's why you see things with this super color. You feel more emotion, you have more knowing and knowledge. It's like you're back home. You're like, oh my God, this is amazing. Whereas out of body experience is almost like the opposite. It's kind of clunky, it's kind of black and white. It's got a weird feeling to it, almost like a scary movie kind of a feel. It's a totally different experience.
Wow. No, that's really fascinating. And then, then there's these other methods. So like you mentioned, remote viewing. So remote viewing, and then also like shamanic journeying, as well as like your wife Sarah is a QHHT practitioner. So then the QHHT experience of past lives or altered states through that. And then also like, I don't know if you're familiar with the Silva method, which also has these things. So these are kind of all different methods and different doorways to experience different versions of this. So then what do you think about some of these in relation to like astral travel and out of body? I'm assuming they're all kind of more towards the astral travel, but what do you think about kind of then these other methodologies?
Yeah, I mean, they're just like you said, different methodologies for doing different things. So like remote viewing is usually more of a precise, like you're trying to get precision information. It's usually coordinate based or something. There's a very specific outcome you're trying to get, or a location or a time or a person or a place that you're trying to get information on. So it's a more refined, it's more of a process. It's you're still dipping into the non-local, information field, and it's all consciousness based, but it's less for like, sightseeing and exploring, and it's more for like information gathering. So there's like a lot of, kind of militant protocols for learning, like controlled remote viewing and different practices, where it's like step by step, you do this, then this, and then this, and you can get information, that you shouldn't be able to get because it's not locally available to you. It's really cool. And so that's something anybody can learn to do. It's definitely trainable. And it's really neat, and it opens your mind to, oh my God, like what else is possible? I just literally I looked at a series of numbers that makes no sense to me, and I was able to gather specific information about a target just by looking at those numbers. Like that blows your mind and makes you want to explore more. And that's doing a very similar thing than we do with like astral travel, except it's more targeted, it's specific, but it's still tapping into the same fundamentals of reality. And it was created by like, our military industrial complex to be able to do like reconnaissance type stuff. So it's more militant, whereas like some of these other things are more explorative. They're like, hey, let's just go explore, like let's go see what's out there, let's go have some fun, kind of like you do in the dream world. And that's fun too, so it's just different. I'm not too familiar with the Silva method, but people talk about it a lot, so I want to dive into that next. But I imagine this is just different people that have had experiences that make them realize that we're more than our physical body, that everything is kind of information based, and that there's different ways to consciously either render and interpret that data, or go and explore and gather that data. And they just develop different modalities for doing that.
Mhm.
So
And
it's
now
not like
so
one's right or wrong, they're just different.
right. I'm probably the least familiar with like the process of remote viewing, but from the others like shamanic journeying, QHHT, Silva method, now Gateway, they all use this kind of similar type of either hypnosis or self-hypnosis technique, or this kind of bringing yourself, which now we know, thanks a lot to Monroe Institute, where we know these are just going into altered brain waves. These are just going to like, theta basically to get this information. And then, since Silva method was in the 60s, so gamma and same thing like QHHT is like also was before gamma was discovered. So a lot of these things are probably going into gamma. It's just that they were all like mostly created before that was even discovered.
Mhm.
And so it's like this very similar process to kind of have different experiences, like with the shamanic journeying, instead of going to kind of real places that are also in the physical, it goes to more like the soul area, or like QHHT, it goes more like outside of time to kind of parallel lives or mirrors of now. And then Silva method has a lot of different things that you can use, but one of the things that you learn in the Silva method is to project your consciousness also into objects, or to do healing, similar to some of the methods that can be done in all of these. So when I've heard people talk about remote viewing, I'm like, wow, this sounds so similar to all of these methods. And it's like all these different pathways that different people have gotten to these altered states.
Yeah. And that's interesting you said about, like, projecting your consciousness into other things, because you know, like, I use the radio analogy because it just kinda makes sense to me, but if you imagine each being, you have a station, I have a station, my cat has a station, there's nothing that says, because it's all information, there's nothing that says that you can't tune to that station and even kind of see things from their point of view and experience things that way, and that's what past life regression does as well, is that, you're kind of visiting past information. So say you had a past life, all that information is stored somewhere. It's stored in the Akashic record, which is just the database of this reality. And you're just accessing that information and kind of reliving. Like it's like watching an old movie, just because that movie's old, all that information's still there. You can, anytime you want, you can go and watch it. And since we're conscious beings and you're tapping into that stream of consciousness, you don't just watch it, you feel it, you get emotion, you're reliving it in a way. And exploring past lives is super, exciting, because it's your past life, and that part's cool. But also, we realize that a lot of things in this life, there is like a residual effect from our past life. Like Dr. Scott Ianson, discovered what he calls death marks, which is like a lot of people's birthmarks are actually like where their fatal wound from a past life, left a mark in their next life. So which shows that, like, our past lives do have a little bit, we do have the memory wipe and all that stuff so that we can focus on task at hand, but there is a little bit of a residual carryover from past lives, different traumas, different phobias. Sometimes we have like these kind of phantom diseases and phantom issues in this life, and we're like, I don't know why I'm so scared of water or something like that. And then you realize, oh, in a past life, I had a traumatic, incident. So it's good to explore those and figure out, you can't change the past, but you can see how maybe certain things in this life are affected by things that happen in past lives. So, I love exploring past lives. I think that that's an amazing thing to do, but it just goes back to the whole, everything's information, and those past lives are just information. It's like a file folder on the desktop, database of the cosmos that you can go and double click on and be like, oh, let's go see what in this life, and how about this? And so if you can do that, there's nothing to say you can't, change your frequency to a different person or to, a different object or something. So that's super interesting. And then, like, you talked about the shamanic journey, and a lot of that typically is actually internal travel. Your people think it has this like astral travel feel to it, but so much of what we think is out there is actually in here. Like, so much of these journeys are just internal journeys. I mean, you have a universe inside of you, and so much of this is exploring inside, and it has the same kind of a feel to it. But I think that it's actually more important to go inside of you and figure out who you
Mhm.
really are, and then going outside and just exploring the cosmos. So you don't have to go out there; you can go in, and I think that's what the shamanic journeys, they try to focus on, is
Mhm.
that part of it.
Right, which is why a lot of the shamanic healing comes through soul retrieval, which again is another pattern that it comes up in so many things. Like, it's very similar to parts work, or very similar to Carl Jung's teachings on the shadow. So it like
Mhm.
also mirrors in all of these different avenues to kind of get to these similar answers. But like the concept that, like, your soul kind of fractals or fractures off from certain traumatic events and then stays stuck kind of in a loop of that. So, like, a part of yourself is constantly reliving that trauma stuck there. And then, like, what
Yeah.
you're saying is a really good point, that you actually kind of almost astral travel deeper into the self, or a shamanic practitioner travels into the self with you and retrieves those parts of yourself back. So as I was thinking of some things to talk about with you, I was thinking about, something that Joe McMoneagle said. And, people were asking him when we were at Monroe about kind of remote viewing into the past versus the future. Like, can you remote view into the future? Is it because the future's changing? And, obviously, I know you've gotten to meet Joe as well, right? And
Hmm.
he's just like, I mean, so profound. Like, he's so just on another level. So, like, his answers are so good. And what he said was, remote viewing the past is easier, but not for the reason that you think, like, oh, because it's already happened. And so it's more solid. He's like, actually, the reason why remote viewing the future is more difficult is because we don't have context yet for what we're seeing. So we're using the now to understand the future. And this
Hmm.
makes me think about, I have one of those metaverse, I don't know, like a meta quest where you can go into the metaverse. And the first time that I had gone into the metaverse, I was like, this is like 5D. Like, what if people are remote viewing the future is like non-physical 5D, but really what they're remote viewing is virtual reality, but don't have the context for it. So what do you think about stuff like
Yeah.
that, remote viewing into the future? And what if we actually have been more so remote viewing technology of the future, but not having the context for it?
Yeah. I mean, it's a great point. Like, think about if, some of these mystics 3,000 years ago remote viewed today, they wouldn't have any idea what any of this stuff is. Like, if I'm sitting here looking at, my phone, they're going to see this and they're not going to know what it is. So they have no context. And that's a great point. We can look at the past and it makes sense to us because we understand all of those things. We're familiar with them. But yeah, the future, I mean, I don't care how good of a futurist you are or any of these people that are plotting out the future. I mean, things are changing so fast. Who knows what the world's going to be like in 5 years, let alone 500 years. So that's a very great point. And when you also think about the future as, you know, like what Tom Campbell describes it as, like a probability distribution field. So it's like you have probabilities, you have possibilities, like possible paths, and each path is assigned a probability. Whenever, what I've been taught is when you remote view the future, what you're doing is remote viewing the most probable future path. So it doesn't mean that that path is necessarily going to happen. That's why so many of the ancient mystics like Nostradamus and those people, they get some things right and some things wrong. It's still fluid, which is good. This world we're in is a free will, simulator. So like we don't want to think that the future is already determined, but there are paths that are more determined than others or more probable, So we're remote viewing the probabilistic future. Um, but even having said that, all of the possible future paths are going to be weird in the sense that we don't have any context to explain them. And so that would add an extra layer of complexity when you're remote viewing, because when you remote view, you don't see an image necessarily. A lot of it is feeling. So sometimes you get a visual, but sometimes you just get a knowing or you get a feeling or you see colors or sounds, you get emotion, you get it's just the information. You're just processing the information. Some people are more visual and other people get it in different ways. So if you're remote view in the future, it's going to be really hard for us because we have to interpret that data. Your consciousness gathers the data and brings it to us, and then we interpret it. But you're going to get this data, and it's not going to make any sense because, like you said, you have no frame of reference. So, yeah, I mean, once again, Joe McMoneagle is on point. That
He's
guy's
such an
amazing.
icon.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that you say that too with remote viewing because with my QHHT clients, one of the things that I really like express super like blatantly several times before putting them under is that like information comes in a lot of ways. And probably the biggest way that you receive it in hypnosis is knowingness. And I kind of give the example like, say, if I was in a future life and I went back and experienced a past life regression now as Jenn, not all of my information would be from what I see. I would look around and be like, okay, I live in an apartment and I think I live here alone. But like, because I don't see anyone, but it's more of the knowingness, how you receive the information. So it comes in a lot of different ways. Like, I'm not going to see everything, but I'm going to have certain knowingness of being in this body. So again, like it's interesting how much these kind of all these methods overlap, similar with astral projection also, right? Because when you astral project, a lot of the information comes more from knowingness than
Hmm.
what the actual details you're seeing are. Now that's
Yeah.
tricky with remote viewing though, right? Because that's actually because remote viewing is so targeted and more like you have to be careful to not go too into knowingness and infer and just continue to stay in that more sensory experience because then you'll fill in blanks and you could
Mhm.
actually kind of lead yourself to information that is not what you're viewing.
Yeah. Totally. They call it the AOL. It's the analytical overlay. So the key to remote viewing, and this is why it's so hard for people to become masters in it, is that we have a left and right brain. So our left brain is more analytical. It's logical. It likes to process information and compare it to experiences and past and that kind of stuff and make sense of data. Our right brain is more intuitive and creative and connected to source and the non-physical. So it goes more with emotion and intuition, gut feelings, that kind of stuff. And they're at constant odds, those two. And when you remote view, the key to it is to tap into your right brain, get all of this information just straight from source, straight from the information field, and you want to doodle, draw, write, whatever it is that hits you immediately, no matter how absurd, no matter if it makes sense or not. You just everything just raw data coming out, and you want to get it out as fast as possible because everyone has a different limit to when their AOL kicks in. But at
Mm.
some point, your left brain is going to kick in and say, that doesn't make any sense. And it's going to start analyzing it. And as soon as you do that, you're done because it's going to try to make sense of data that it can't really make sense of because it has no frame of reference. So our left brain's like the supercomputer, and our right brain is like the hippie on mushrooms. And like they're both right and they're both wrong, and they have to work together. But certain times you need your left brain, certain times you need your right brain. These are actually directly tied to your sympathetic and your parasympathetic nervous system. Like everything in your body is like this duality that you're trying to harmonize and sync together. So certain times you can tap into one, certain times you tap into the other. With remote viewing, you want to stay as right brain as possible for as long as possible. Get all that data out, and then when you're done, when you're completely done with your session, then you engage your left brain and you say, "Okay, supercomputer, look at all this. Let's make sense of it." But so like to your point, that analytical overlay, that analytical part comes in and starts messing things up. And so that's kind of the struggle and the difficulty with remote viewing is because it's really hard to just keep your right brain engaged for a long time without your left brain intervening.
And so it's interesting, Jake Barber, the UFO whistleblower, the most recent one that talked about like the egg and how he had kind of like a consciousness experience with like a godmother. And
Hmm.
he talks about that the reason why UFOs are at these military sites is because they're being summoned. And what he talked about was like what he called like the three eyes. I think that was three eyes. And it was instinct, intuition, and intellect. And you kind of have to like subside your instinct and your intellect, go all the way into intuition, and then towards the end pull back the intellect for you to be able to process and pull like more information through to be able to actually kind of do these psionic communications or you know whatever they're actually doing. Is it telepathy? So it's interesting. It's like the same type of thing. All of these different, same thing with QHHT, same thing with the
Hmm.
shamanic journeying. If like a shaman starts to think, is this real? And starts like getting analytical, they're going to be like, same thing with like someone under hypnosis. I always warn people under hypnosis that I'm like, your left brain is alive and well. It's gonna ask if I'm making this up. It's going to have questions. I'm like, just acknowledge it and let it go aside and let it, have its moment if it needs its moment. And just remember that it's brain waves. So they're going up, but they're always going down. It's waves. It's always
Hmm.
gonna, whereas, because you have a lot more freedom with these other methods than with remote viewing because it is to get specific targeted information, like you're saying.
Yeah, that's interesting. You said that about Skywatcher because like that is the dance. We are in this, like, if you look at the physical body as an instrument, it's a tuning instrument for consciousness. It's all about how you can sort of manipulate it, for lack of better words, but control like the instrument. Like I said, sometimes you want to be totally on your left brain, sometimes you want to be totally right brain, sometimes you want to be in the middle. But to be able to intentionally and deliberately, like yourself, control that is really where the power comes in, because that's when you can traverse all these different realms and realities, and that's where like the psionics teams can directly communicate and interface with whatever you want to call it, spiritual beings, non-human intelligence, whatever it is, because they're not locked into this human body. They're not in the same instrument as us. So it's like we almost have to adjust ourselves to be on their level. And we can do that. You can, intentionally adjust yourself to be on their level. But, your body's going to always kind of be fighting it because it's trying to get back to neutral. So it's just about being in control of yourself and being able to deliberately, make these changes and choices whenever you want to. So it all goes back to like the thousands of years ago when all the ancient mystics were talking about know thyself. I mean, that's really what it's all about, is when you're in control of your body, your thoughts, your emotions, and you can clearly communicate with yourself, and you can tune your instrument exactly how you want and fine tune yourself. You can fine tune yourself to do all sorts of amazing things. You can be a Jedi, you can be whatever you want. It's all about being in control of your vessel. And that's what all these people are figuring out.
And, too, kind of on the more spiritual side of it, you have these people who are kind of like accidental mediums where they just kind of go into a store and all of a sudden they're like, this isn't my dad, but a dad is telling me something, or going into a thrift store and then getting all these impressions. And like really what you're talking about is like kind of fine tuning your vessel. So these people who kind of have their abilities, either mediumship or whatever it is, kind of come on abruptly. And then they don't have that on and off switch. It
Yeah.
gets them super ungrounded. And then it's also harder for them to filter the information through the channel that is them, because obviously all channelers, it's going through their filter of beliefs and their filter of reference. And so it's not neutral information. But then, like you're saying, is the more that you know yourself, the more that you fine tune yourself, the more that you study these different methods, the more you can get more like remote viewing, more neutral information that is just factual.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, everything that comes through us is going to go through you as a human being. Like, so it's going to be slightly filtered by, your belief systems and biases and that kind of stuff. We're all human. So there is no such thing, if it's coming out of a human being, there's no such thing as unfiltered raw data. It's always going to be filtered a little bit by the person. Some people it's filtered a lot bit by. That's why even people that channel, I don't know, Galactic Federation, whatever beings and stuff out there, it's still going through that human being. So you should never just unequivocally believe anything anyone says. It doesn't mean they're even intentionally distorting it. It's just everything goes through our personal filters. That's good. That's what makes us humans. But it just basically means that, it's really hard to ever get. That's why there's so much conflicting information. It's really hard to ever get just pure, objective source data, because it has to go through us and we are, subjective. So nothing wrong with that. It just means always be discerning about everything,
And that's why we're, source broken into all of these different IMs and all of these different perceptions is exactly that reason, is to have these different subjective perceptions of what is happening, perceptions of reality. But yes, a lot of people kind of take the information 100% as like channeled information is 100% true. And also with my experiences with some spiritual stuff is I also think it's lost a little bit that you get what you need. And a lot of it is a story. Everything is a story because we need stories.
Mhm.
So like a lot of spiritual channeled, even, past life stuff, things like that, everything is a story, because this is like, say, how we teach children. We teach
Yeah.
children about right and wrong through stories. We teach them not to lie with The Boy Who Cried Wolf. Now, as you get older, you can understand why honesty is good. But I feel like, humans as a whole, we've had to use stories to understand. This is why the Bible is a book of stories. This is why New Age spirituality is a new flavor of stories for a different group of people.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the parables, metaphors, it's all just, we're just trying to interpret the information the best we can. And that's the only way we can do it, is to put it in story form, because it's really hard to just spit out. It's like, I'm looking at you on a computer right now and I can see you and you look great and you're in your room. It looks great. There's colors everywhere. But like, this is really literally just zeros and ones. It's just binary information. But if we just saw a screen of binary zeros and ones, we wouldn't know how to. So we have this, user interface that computes that and turns it into these pretty images. And that's essentially, there's a guy named Donald Hoffman, and Donald Hoffman has he breaks down, he's a neurologist. I think he's a neurologist or a neuroscientist. But anyways, he's breaks down that basically the human being is just like a VR headset for consciousness, and it renders this world and it makes everything like icons. And it's very similar to how like a computer screen renders zeros and ones to make pretty images. That's how our eyes and everything work. So we live in this like story world because nothing that we see is actually the way it really is. Because if it really was displayed that way, it wouldn't make any sense. So we render it and we bring it to life. But that's why everything has this kind of dream-like feel to it, because, you know, we think everything is solid and material, but when you drill down to the smallest level, it's all just vortices of energy. Like there is no physicality to anything. It's just rendered and perceived that way. You know, so like I think our eyes are telling us stories, our brains telling us stories, like everything is telling us a story, not because it's lying to us, just because that's how reality works.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So I saw you just did some stuff on the telepathy tapes. And what do you think about these non-physical collective locations? So obviously telepathy tapes has put a lot of that into the public awareness with like the Hill and with children going there. But what do you think about these collective non-physical spaces and people traveling to them? And do you have experience with going to these places?
Yeah, so it's so interesting. So like, you know, when I fell in love with Robert Monroe and read all of his books and just got immersed in Monroe Institute stuff, I did it for healing purposes because I had to heal my body back and I couldn't like medicines and stuff weren't working. So I used all of his like, you know, energy bar tool and all this stuff. I was remote viewing inside my body and healing myself from the inside out and doing all this stuff. And I had this like miraculous healing. And that's what led me to doing all the things I do now. And in doing so, I like, you know, immerse myself into his world. And one of the parts of his world, like, because he was able to kind of map out the astral realms and map out, you know, because he traveled out of body and astrally for decades and had explorer teams and these highly trained people that were helping him map out everything. And one of the places they found was called the park. And the park was this like this in between. It's like where you went after physical death, and it was where you went to kind of chill and relax and kind of come down. And there would be all sorts of things to do there, and it had all these pathways that led to other places after that. But it was like a way station. It was just a place to go and have a little R&R after the, you know, trauma of death and earth life experience. And it was a very real place. And bunches of people have been there. I've been there. People I know have been there. It's a real place that the human consciousness has created, and many people, when they first transition after physical death, they go to the park, and it's so real that Tom Campbell, who is one of the original science engineers and consultants for the Monroe Institute, who's an amazing person, he wrote a book that's all about going to the park and like how you can go there and explore, and there's different like places you go and you can practice different like modalities, like, you know, extrasensory perception modalities in the park, and you bring that knowledge back and it makes you better at it here on earth. Anyways, it's a very real place, and you go to the park and you can have experiences with other humans, and then you can come back and that person will remember seeing you in the park and everything. So I
Wow.
was already infatuated with the park years ago, and then when I started listening to the telepathy tapes and they were talking about the Hill, and I was like, oh my god. So they created their own park essentially, like these kids, especially the nonverbal autistics, that kind of have a rough go at it in life. You know, if you think about it, you're in a body and you're only kind of partially in there, and you know, it's a very tough and confusing way to operate in this world. They have amazing abilities. I was at the Psy Games. I was able to see a couple of people from the telepathy tapes do these demonstrations that you can't explain. I mean, it just blows your mind. This is very real. They have very amazing psychic abilities, and they're just amazing humans in general. But they have created this this place in the astral where, of course, anyone can go there, but obviously they created it for themselves, where they feel safe, where they can go and like kind of dip out of this reality and go there. And it seems like they spend a lot of time there. It seems like they probably spend more time there than they do here, and I don't blame them. And it's really neat. So I had a little bit of context because I'd already been exploring the park from the Monroe world and very familiar with that. And so when I heard about the Hill, I was like, man, how cool is that? That like groups of consciousnesses, groups of souls can come together and create this astral location that you can go to. It's like if you have the address, you know how to get there. You can go there. They go there just by thinking about it. And now I've heard other people that aren't nonverbal autistics are trying to go there and stuff. And I would just caution against that, not because you're not invited or allowed or anything, just because that's their place, it's their sacred place. And I just think it's really cool that they did that. And I totally believe in that because it's a real thing. And if you want to explore an astral place like that, let's leave the hill alone, but go to the park and explore the park. Because in one of Robert Monroe's books, they took him in the astral to the park, and the lady who's kind of over it, I guess you would say, kind of like manager of the park kind of a deal, told him that she wanted to show him this, even though he hadn't physically died, because she wanted him to come back to Earth and tell people about it, because she wanted people to be able to visit it in the astral, because she said that if you're familiar with it, then once you do transition, it makes the rest of it so much easier because you're already familiar with it. You're not starting from scratch every time. So they encourage you to go to the park and explore it.
Wow. And it's so interesting because there's so many different things that kind of have crossover information. Like Journey of Souls kind of talks about these like kind of transportation hubs that people pass through before and after incarnation. And they're kind of meeting up with soul family before like incarnating. Or then we see people with different religious beliefs, how they create afterlife spaces like heaven, or Muslim people will kind of create this liminal space that they stay in until judgment day, where because they don't believe in reincarnation, they'll stay there and be rejoined with their family in this suspended state until this day comes.
Mhm.
And it's also interesting too, is like, obviously Earth is a simulation. And then there's simulations around that simulation, like the park, like heaven, like, these other places, people who believe in reincarnation, and they kind of go to these halls where there's teachings and guides and counsels. And,
Mhm.
in this Whitley Strieber book called The Key, it says people who don't meditate dissipate when they die. So it's interesting that what you said about kind of the park and being able to kind of go to the park as an in-between state, and also kind of overlaps with like the Tibetan Book of the Dead, of kind of navigating where to go after you cross over. So like,
Yeah.
what do you think about some of these afterlife spaces that are created?
Yeah. So, you know, I've talked extensively about this, so I have, you know, kind of refined opinions on it. Um, I definitely believe that there is a more or less a sort of a path that you're supposed to take in the life between lives, right? It's not rigid in the sense that everybody's journey is a little different. As soon as you pass over, that part's where it gets really tricky, because if you have a very strongly held belief system, there's a very good chance you're going to go to a place that you are magnetically drawn to because it's going to fit with your belief system. So that's why a lot of people, when they cross over, they see something that has to do with their religious beliefs. That's very common, but that doesn't mean that that's an actual place. That's a place more than likely that people have created as a safe place. And then your higher self being the totality of all your lifetimes, it's kind of the the complete you. It sends in pieces of itself, like rovers, to help pluck you out of these belief system territories. It has to. You can't fully ascend and leave this realm until you're whole and you're complete. So if you have parts of you that are stuck in these belief systems, they have to go in and extract you. But they do it in a gentle way, and they're not in a hurry or anything like that. You're not doing anything wrong. It's just you do get stuck in those. But once you get out of that belief system territory, there is kind of uh, I don't know, a process. It's very clear, especially when you read people like Dr. Michael Newton, who studied thousands of people in the life between lives, and other people that have done the same thing. They tell very similar stories. People that have no interaction with each other, they tell very similar stories of this sort of pathway where you do have a past life review, where you are reviewing, not with like God or anything. It's usually with your higher self, talking about what you did right and wrong, things you can learn, that kind of stuff. There is this like council of elders where you do go before people that seem to be way higher up in the hierarchy, that do kind of not judge you but guide you, and they look at the higher perspective of not just this past lifetime but all of your lifetimes, and maybe not even just Earth but other systems. And then you do plan your next incarnation. You do go to a place where you sometimes more developed souls can actually select their next avatar and select exact um, family type settings, you actually sort of coordinate with your soul cluster and your soul group. And okay, you're going to be this person. I'm going to be this person. We're going to, you kind of go at it like you're entering into a play or something. And, depending on where you are in your developmental level. But that stuff's been talked about by so many people in so many ways in such rich detail, it's kind of hard to ignore it. That there does seem to be a progression in the life between lives. Now, having said all that, when you really, really zoom out, I do believe that this Earth is like I call it, a simulator for consciousness development. This is a free will simulator that our consciousness uses to, grow and learn and evolve. But we do get stuck. We're not supposed to be here forever. I think we're supposed to, it's like school, I call it the Van Wilder effect. Like you're supposed to go to college for a few years, get your information, have some fun, and then get the hell out. But like you can be Van Wilder and you can just be like, no, once I graduate, I have to do real world things. I'm gonna stay here and party. And I think that we get stuck in this roundabout thinking, okay, well, last time, I wasn't famous, next time I want to be famous. Or last time I was poor, next time I want to be rich. And even after you've learned all your lessons and all the things you came here to do, you just keep going at it because it's kind of fun, kind of addictive. Earth life is interesting. And I think that, that there is like the spirit world where all that happens, the life between lives, is just another layer of the simulator. So when you're in that
Mhm.
layer, people think, oh, you're back to source and that kind of stuff. I don't think so. I think that it's just like a waiting area, a loading area for this world. And that just because you're there doesn't mean you're out. You're still in just a different level of the simulator. And the goal is just like college, is to ultimately graduate, to learn all the lessons, see everything from every point of view, and at some point spiritually ascend. You don't physically escape Earth. It's not a prison planet. You spiritually ascend, you graduate. And I think that there is a little bit of a stagnant like thing happening where souls are just kind of coming back for no reason. That's why there's 8 billion of us. There's never been near this many people here. And I think at some point we need to kind of come to our senses. And I think it's what this whole consciousness kind of ascension that's happening, this collective awakening, is realizing, oh, wait, crap. We aren't humans. We are spirits having a human experience. And we were probably only supposed to do this for like maybe 20 or 30 lifetimes. And we've been here for like 700 lifetimes. So maybe it's time to like learn some of these lessons and get on with it.
I so agree with that. And like really this like concept that this is like an extension of the simulation. So like the way that we hold reality with our consciousness, like we continue to hold this reality with so many people observing it. Then there's like other aspects of ourselves or guides or other beings that kind of hold that simulation outside to guide us through the process. And then, one thing then a topic that I'm super like, I'm always fighting with people on my lives about this in the comments and stuff about this topic, which is what they call the white light soul trap. Because what you believe is what you will experience. Like people who believe that heaven and hell and that they have lived a life that might end up with them going to hell, they might experience a version of hell as they're
Mm,
crossing. And then the same thing with this whole don't go into the light, white light soul trap, prison planet. There's a net. They're trapping you. I'm like,
yeah.
oh my God, what a way to like mess yourself up through crossing over is to like believe that this is like, but I believe it's more so what you're saying is that it is very fun here. This is like the greatest game in our universe. So of course we want to keep coming back and playing it. It's like someone still wanting to go back and like play some video game from the 80s because it was awesome and nostalgic and great. When I did ayahuasca and I like had this really oneness experience, I was terrified at the idea of not coming back to this, and I was like, "Oh my god, no, I wasn't done, let me go back." And so I understand that then being outside of this, the need to want to come back here and enjoy this again. And, a lot of people in kind of the ascension communities, they kind of want to escape Earth more from like to escape suffering, to I don't have any more lessons and things like that. Whereas, like, I believe it's a lot more what you're saying, which is like, well, there's other things to do. It's not because you're so enlightened that you're so done and you don't need this anymore and it's behind you, it's below you. It's actually like that there's other things to experience. And so, I think, Destiny of Souls, they talk about it. And I believe Dolores Cannon and lots of other people have talked about it that after this whole process of ascension or growing, I like to now use it more like expansion and like widening versus up and down hierarchy type of perspective. But I think
Mhm.
once it gets like wide enough perspective, a lot of people talk about creating their own universe and kind of being like a new one of a different universe. So do you
Yeah.
think that that's kind of what's at the end?
If I had to guess, yeah. There's a book called Journeys of the Afterlife, and William Bullman. I might have the last name wrong, but anyways, amazing book. And he is a long time, graduate and trainer at the Monroe Institute. And something really interesting in his book that he said that I've been able to kind of verify with other people in the know, that he said that, and I'll just shorten it, but essentially we come to Earth to learn how to manage our thoughts and emotions, because there's a buffer here. There's a delay. We don't have instant manifestation, instant creation. But when you're out in other parts of the non-physical, right? So the universe is probably at 99% plus non-physical, and we're just this small little physical node of experience. But most of it's non-physical. When you're in the non-physical, things happen at the speed of thought. Okay, you can instantly create, instantly manifest things. And there's different, it's compartmentalized. And most souls and consciousnesses don't have access to the actual, like what they call the absolute, the part of non-physical that you do have instant creation, instant manifestation. And if you don't have pure thoughts, pure intentions, if you don't have control over your emotions and things like that, you can create all sorts of havoc. Imagine the havoc you could create in a place where you could instantly create, manifest anything you thought of. So we have 100 to 150,000 thoughts a day. Every human being does. And thank God we don't have instant creation, right? It'd be bananas. So that's why like manifestation is so hard, because what you're trying to do is isolate a very particular thought and make it clear to your higher self in the universe that this particular thought, out of the 150,000 I had today, this thought I want to manifest. And there's all sorts of ways to do that. But we come to Earth to refine our thoughts and our behaviors and our emotions, so that when we do ascend and evolve and graduate, and we do click out of here and we do go to the next level probably being more in line with us being an actual creator than a consumer. So we practice creation here, we practice manifestation here, but it's just practice. That's why I use the analogy of like, this is a simulator, the same way a pilot uses a flight simulator to become a better pilot. Because when that pilot's in a flight simulator, if he does some crazy maneuver and he crashes that plane, he knows he didn't really crash a plane. Nobody got hurt. So we come here for the same reason, to try things and to experiment and to have these experiences, knowing that it's not really going to hurt anything on the other side, minus nuclear weapons. I think that's a totally different story, but that's the only really thing that we can do that has a true effect on the non-physical realms and dimensions. And we come here to practice and to learn, so that one day when we do graduate, when we pluck all of our pieces out of the belief systems, when we've learned all of our lessons, we've seen life from every perspective and point of view, and we are a complete spiritual being that has empathy, that has, love, and that just basically is in complete control of its thoughts, intentions, and emotions, and only wants to reduce entropy and only wants to further evolve and raise consciousness at a universal level. When you finally obtain that, and you are kind of plucked up to the higher echelons of the non-physical, they know at that point you can be trusted. And that was just basically a long way of saying that we come here, and if you're in a human body, it's because you're not at that level yet. You're not there. So all these people that say, this is my last incarnation, I've had it with this place, humans suck, yada yada, I hate to break it to you, you're coming back. And you're coming back because you have that mindset. And that's why we're here. We're here to get rid of that mindset, right? We're here to basically level up and get past that way of thinking, so that we can become creators. I know people that are super religious don't like that point of view, because there's only one supreme creator. And there might be one supreme creator. That doesn't mean that there's not many creators that are kind of created in the same style and format and template of the supreme creator. I do believe there probably is a supreme creator. But I do think that our trajectory, and the reason why we're doing this, is we're training and we're learning to get somewhere, to become something. And I think that's what we're trying to ultimately become.
Wow, beautiful. Jordan, it was such a pleasure to have this conversation. So many amazing things, so many amazing topics that we could like literally go so much deeper into. Maybe we'll do it again soon if you're down. So tell us what you have going on. I know you have courses, you have your book, you have your podcast. Tell us where and what to learn more about your teachings.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much for having me, Jen. This really is like a super cool moment. So I love you. We watch all of your stuff, and you've been a big inspiration. So,
Oh, I love you
um,
guys. You guys are the best.
what I'm working on now, so it's funny, just doing all the crazy TikToks and stuff. I guess I caught the eye of some people, and Spectre Vision Radio is Daniel Noah and Elijah Wood. They're very big in Hollywood and stuff, and they're creating this new platform of podcasts. And they want to bring on, they're driven with a purpose to bring on people like me and the yous of the world that have a story, because they're trying to raise the collective consciousness. So where it started off as more mystery horror type stuff, I won't get into his story, but he did have something happen that made him change his course. And now this is going to be like a big elevating platform for things like this, trying to level up consciousness. And so they chose me. I have a new podcast. It's called Conscious Observers. It's kind of a not your typical podcast. It's just me walking in the woods. And I do it twice a week, every Tuesday and Thursday. I talk about the most far out stuff that you've ever heard, but in a lighthearted way. It's relaxing, it's fun, I'm in nature. It's a good time. And so, check out Conscious Observers podcast. And then I guess I'll plug my course. I don't typically like plugging stuff, but I'm very excited about this because I've been working on it for 2 years, and it's set to release next week. It's called Soul Sync. I don't know when this episode will come out, but sometime mid-August or so. And basically it's goes into a lot of what we talked about. It's my understanding through all my experiences is that basically we are a human self and a higher self, and we are integrated into the experience. And our human self is autonomous and has its own level of consciousness, and it's here, and there's things that it wants to do and needs to do, and is built to do. And then our higher self comes in with its own to-do list and missions and purpose for this incarnation. And so much of our struggles and our diseases and things like that we have is just simply because we're not on the same page with each other. It's like two roommates in a house and they're not getting along. It kind of sucks. So that's why people have these dissociative issues and they don't feel at home in their body and that kind of stuff. Once you analyze who your human self is, and that's what this course does. I take you through this process. It's really freaking cool. And you do a full scan and using something called cosmic human design and some other elements that I've created. You do this full understanding of who your human self is. And once it's seen, and once you know exactly who your human self is, you start doing the things that it wants. You talk to it, you feed it what it's here to do and what it wants, and it's so happy. And then you communicate with your higher self and figure out, okay, what's my mission? What's my to-do list? Like, what did I come here to do? And then you figure that out. And then when you do all this and you integrate these two things, you synchronize them. So I call it soul sync. Then they're both on the same page. The roommates in the house are getting along and vibing. And then you discover your true path. And usually it's two paths. You usually have a human self path and a higher self path. And you create this plan, this actual action plan to go and fulfill both your destinies. And you do it in this harmonious way that brings balance to your body and your life. And it's called Soul Sync.
Wow, it sounds incredible. Oh my God, I love that. I'm going to link below because this will be out just this coming week. So it'll be enough time for people to start it for the launch.
Perfect.
Hey, Jordan, thank you so much. I so appreciate you. Honestly, can't wait to have you back and to dig into a whole bunch more of these topics.
Thank you so much, Jen. And thank you everybody for watching.
Thanks for listening to Ultra Minds with JK Ultra, where every Thursday we come out with a new interviewing some of the greatest minds in spirituality, consciousness, aliens, conspiracies, astrology, and so much more. And make sure you check out my Tuesday Night Live every Tuesday night, where I do a live stream and we do a Q&A and we go a deep dive into topics like the simulation theory, shadow work, spiritual bypassing, spiritual gurus turned cult leaders, aliens, my own experiences, and so much more. So make sure you subscribe, put on notifications, and if you would like to support my work, you can also become a subscriber to my Substack, which is $11 a month at jennifercarmody.substack.com. And once a month for our paid subscribers, we do a live event where we do a group hypnosis, a group meditation, or a group manifestation exercise. And thank you so much. Make sure that you subscribe, comment, do all the things, all the YouTube stuff.